Because of this injury, it looks like I'll be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. I can't burden you with this, so let's get a divorce. My husband said to me with a weak voice, sitting up in bed with his head hung low. Hearing this, his brother-in-law faced him and said encouragingly, "You shouldn't make such a big decision right now. And Nancy wouldn't abandon you in this state, right? Divorce because he didn't want to be a burden?" Knowing his usual tyrannical behavior, I almost burst out laughing at his words. He might truly be down about his injury, but his statement sounded like he was drunk on playing the considerate husband in front of his brother. Watching the situation, I thought, now's the time. The perfect moment to expose the misdeeds of my husband had arrived. Resolved, I faced him squarely and stated firmly, "I hate to say this while you're down, but you and I are already divorced, you know?" I had secretly divorced him. Both my husband and his brother were shocked, but my revelation was far from over. Because I held even more secrets about my husband. I'm Nancy. I'm 35 years old, working part-time and also a housewife. My husband is 5 years younger than me and works at a company run by his older brother. This year marks 10 years since we got married, but our marriage has grown cold. I met my husband at the company where I used to work full-time. His brother's company was a client of my company, and through that connection, we became acquainted and he started inviting me out for meals. Initially, I was a bit concerned about him being younger than me, but I was drawn to him persistently asking me out and his reliable personality despite his age, and we started dating. After dating for about a year, he proposed, and we got married. The early days of our marriage were very happy living with my kind husband, but that happiness didn't last long. One day, a few years into our marriage, the company I worked for went bankrupt due to the recession. I was shocked as it was a company I had been with since my graduation, where I felt comfortable and fulfilled. Since it was a layoff due to bankruptcy, I would receive unemployment benefits for a period, and having liked the work environment at my previous job, I wanted to take my time choosing my next job, planning to focus mainly on housework while I searched. However, when I discussed this with my husband, he strongly disagreed. "Don't dilly-dally, find a job and start earning right away," he urged me. I was taken aback, having never expected to be spoken to in such a way. Maybe he was worried because I used to earn more than him before the company went under. But we have decent savings, and his salary alone should be more than enough to sustain us. I tried to convince him, but he stubbornly refused. He had various reasons, but it seemed he just couldn't stand the idea of being the only one working. It's not like I'm saying I won't work forever, it's just about half a year or so. I wanted to find a full-time job, but with my current skills and age, it was hard to find work, so I started a part-time cleaning job that was offering the highest hourly wage at the time. I believe any job is an experience and serves society, so I enjoyed working in cleaning just as much as before. When the places I cleaned looked nice and sometimes when people said, "Thanks for cleaning," it really made me feel good. However, despite hurrying to find a job and starting work out of respect for my husband's opinion, he began to verbally abuse me around that time, saying things like, "You're just an older woman earning less than me, and you're just a part-time leech. Why would you say that? I rushed into a job because you pushed me," I protested, but whenever I talked back, he would hit household objects, so I gradually became too afraid to say anything to him. Lately, every time we see each other at home, he mocks me, and I'm forced to endure it alone. My brother-in-law, who owns the company where my husband works, lives with his wife. Neither couple has children, and we, as well as my brother-in-law and his wife, have a somewhat close familial relationship, regularly dining together. My brother-in-law is calm and kind, a really nice person, but his wife is strong-willed. Being in her 30s like us, but dressing and talking in a flashy, youthful way, I find her a bit hard to deal with. Lately, whenever we meet, she starts mocking me for being plain and gloomy, which has been very stressful. My brother-in-law reprimands her on the spot, telling her not to say rude things, but she just laughs it off, saying, "It's just a joke," and my husband joins in on belittling me. I still remember how she laughed at me when I lost my job and started working in the cleaning industry, saying, "Look at you, the cleaning lady. Suits you right. I protested against her belittling my beloved job, but it was just laughed off and nothing changed. Whether they know about our troubled marriage or not, she always picks on and belittles me every time we meet. Influenced by her, my husband has become even harsher towards me. Even when I'm just doing household chores normally, he accuses me with verbal abuse like, "Don't make my food with your dirty hands," and whereas before he only hit objects, now he's started to physically assault me as well. Unable to bear the current hardships and with my in-laws already passed away, I've thought many times about consulting my brother-in-law, but since my husband and his wife hide their true natures in front of him, pretending to be considerate, I doubt he knows anything about my current situation. If I were to bring it up, I'd be dealing with my articulate husband and his sister-in-law. Instead, they might just pull my brother-in-law to their side, leaving me even more isolated. Thinking this, I felt unable to take any action and had no choice but to endure. And while it bothers me how my husband and his wife mock me together, their unusually close relationship lately has also been concerning. One day around noon, while I was living through these tough times, I received a call from my husband's company. He was currently away on a business trip for about a week. It was unusual for them to contact me directly, especially at such a time, and I answered the phone wondering what it could be about. To my shock, the call was to inform me that my husband had been in an accident during his trip and was taken to the hospital. They asked me to come to the hospital immediately, so I headed to the designated hospital. When I arrived and went to the room I was directed to, I found my husband reclining on the hospital bed, looking utterly dejected. His brother, the company president, had also rushed to his side. As I asked about his condition, his brother shook his head quietly with a troubled expression. Then, with his head still bowed, my husband told me, "Because of this injury, it looks like I'll be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. I can't burden you with this, so let's get a divorce." Divorce because he didn't want to be a burden? Knowing my husband's usual tyrannical ways, I almost burst out laughing at his words. He might truly be down about his injury, but his statement sounded like he was drunk on playing the considerate husband in front of his brother. He probably thought that by saying this, I would never leave him. However, to my husband, who spoke so weakly, my brother-in-law, not knowing his true nature, encouraged him, saying, "You shouldn't make such a big decision right now. And Nancy wouldn't abandon you in this state, right?" Watching their exchange, I thought, now's the time. The perfect moment to expose the misdeeds of my husband and his sister-in-law had come. Resolved, I faced my husband squarely and stated firmly, "I hate to say this while you're down, but you and I are already divorced, you know? This all started 3 months ago, during a typical evening at home, drinking." My husband, perhaps feeling bold from the alcohol, began verbally abusing me as I sat quietly enduring it. Perhaps emboldened by the alcohol, my husband flaunted a piece of paper in front of me and said, "I'm telling you, I'm ready for a divorce anytime. I've already prepared this." What my husband showed me was a divorce form, already filled out on his part. He probably thought that by threatening me with divorce, I, a part-time cleaner, would become more submissive, not wanting to be abandoned. But for me, that paper was the greatest chance to smoothly divorce him. While enduring his verbal abuse, I kept my focus on the divorce form he held. After tossing the divorce form on the desk, my husband ridiculed me, drank himself into a stupor, and then fell asleep on the bed, snoring away in the middle of the day. Once I was sure he was sound asleep, I quickly retrieved the divorce form, filled out my part, and sneaked out to submit it at the city office. If I had initiated the divorce, given my husband's personality, his pride would have been hurt, and he likely would have become indignant, finding all sorts of reasons not to agree to it easily. That's why I had been waiting for the right timing, even though I wanted to divorce. Never did I expect that he would bring such an opportunity to me. Thanks to that incident, I was able to smoothly finalize our divorce. When I mentioned that we were already divorced, my husband reacted with a shocked "what?" and was visibly shaken. Surprised by my sudden revelation, his brother asked, "What do you mean by that?" Responding to his question, I opened a notebook in front of the two of them. It was a notebook in which I had meticulously recorded the verbal and physical abuse from my husband, with dates, times, and details documented as evidence. His brother took it from me, hurriedly checking the contents. With each page he turned, his breathing became erratic, and his hands seemed to tremble.
Nancy! I had no idea things had gotten this bad. I'm really sorry for what my brother has done.
Saying this, my brother-in-law sincerely apologized me with a pained expression on his face. Then he sternly scolded my husband, saying, "What on earth are you doing? This behavior is despicable." Although my husband was being sternly reprimanded by my brother-in-law, he dismissively snorted, "She's just exaggerating," and smirked with an air of nonchalance. "Well, if you want a divorce over this, I won't stop you. I won't lose anything without a parasite like you around," he said with a malicious grin, no longer pretending in front of his brother-in-law. However, despite hearing my husband's malicious and terrible words, they no longer hurt me. It was because I had another secret of his in my grasp. After a tense standoff with my husband, I feigned a sudden realization and asked him in a deliberately casual tone, "Oh? By the way, where is your sister-in-law?" At my words, my husband's face instantly paled, and he visibly panicked. His brother was puzzled, not understanding why his wife was being brought up at this moment. Leaving the two of them behind, I stepped out of the room. Without hesitation, I swung open the door to the adjacent hospital room. There, I found my brother-in-law's wife sitting nervously on the bed. I grabbed her arm and, despite her reluctance, led her back to my ex-husband's room. Taken aback by the unexpected appearance of his wife, my brother-in-law widened his eyes in surprise and muttered, "Why are you here?" In fact, my husband and his sister-in-law had been having an affair. I had always been suspicious of the close relationship between my husband and sister-in-law. Even after our divorce was finalized, I continued to live with him for 3 months solely to gather evidence of their affair. I even hired a private investigator without his knowledge, and during these 3 months, I thoroughly investigated them. Sure enough, I found proof of their affair just as I had suspected. During the investigation, I learned that the sister-in-law had lied to her husband about being on a company training, took paid leave, and accompanied my husband on his business trip. After hearing that my husband was hospitalized due to an injury, I suspected that my sister-in-law, who had been with him, might have been brought to the hospital as well. When I inquired at the reception, it turned out exactly as I had thought. The sister-in-law was admitted for a checkup due to minor injuries, and it seems that the hospital did not contact my brother-in-law because she had told them she would contact her own family. I confronted my trembling, sweating husband on his hospital bed, saying, "From now on, you can ask your mistress, your sister-in-law, to take care of you." Then, I spread out the evidence I had gathered over the past 3 months on the table. Bringing the evidence was a good call, suspecting that the sister-in-law might also be hospitalized. Exchanges between my husband and his sister-in-law on a messaging app, and photos of the two of them on what seemed to be dates, were part of the evidence. These were printed and enlarged to letter size, totaling about 50 pages. Both of them were speechless at the amount of evidence. And the brother-in-law was shaking with anger. Desperate, the sister-in-law clung to her husband, pleading, "This isn't what it looks like." But he forcefully pulled her away and said quietly, yet filled with anger, "So you two have been deceiving Nancy and me all this time, doing such things behind our backs. I can never forgive this." As I watched this turmoil unfold, I thought to myself, what I've been through is far worse than this. And with that, I decided to ensure they both deeply regretted their actions by seeking revenge. After they were discharged from the hospital, it was arranged to have a discussion at the brother-in-law's house about what comes next. It was the first time we would see each other since that chaotic day at the hospital. Both my ex-husband and his sister-in-law looked different, with dark circles under their eyes and a haggard appearance. "I'm sorry for cheating. It won't happen again. Let's try to make it right." My ex-husband said this to me, his eyes pleading, as he sat across from me. Having been oppressed by my ex-husband for years, his words felt insubstantial to me. I ignored what he said and demanded compensation for the affair from both him and his sister-in-law, placing documents on the table that outlined the amount and breakdown of the damages owed. I also added compensation for the emotional distress caused by the years of verbal abuse from my ex-husband. Upon seeing the amount requested for compensation, my ex-husband's remorseful attitude disappeared completely, and he snapped at me, "Don't get too comfortable just because I've been quiet." Beside him, his sister-in-law quickly chimed in, "That's right." My brother-in-law rebuked them, "I thought you two were reflecting on your actions." Ignoring their words, I said, "We'll handle the rest through lawyers," and tried to stand up, but in a fit of rage, my ex-husband lunged at me. Overpowered by his weight, I was pinned down. Struggling, I looked at my ex-husband and saw that he was holding a box cutter, likely grabbed from a nearby desk. Instinctively sensing danger, I tried with all my weight to push my ex-husband away, but despite his disability, I couldn't muster enough strength to move his large, heavy body. Behind my ex-husband, my brother-in-law desperately tried to pull him away, but it seemed as if my ex-husband had lost all reason, displaying incredible strength. As my ex-husband flailed his arms, he struck my brother-in-law in the face, sending him flying backward. My sister-in-law panicked at the scene, merely screaming. Seeing my husband waving the box cutter around to keep anyone from approaching, my body tensed up. I thought it was over. Bracing to be stabbed, I closed my eyes in terror. Then it happened.
Get away from Nancy!
I heard a shout in a stern, commanding tone I had never heard before from my brother-in-law. Startled, my ex-husband instinctively turned towards my brother-in-law, and I also opened my eyes and looked in the direction of the voice. There was my brother-in-law, his cheek swollen and nose bleeding from being hit by my ex-husband, holding a knife and pointing it at my ex-husband. The normally gentle brother-in-law was now enraged, and my ex-husband was visibly shaken, having a knife pointed at him by his brother. I pushed away my now weakened ex-husband and called the police. Watching me call the police, my ex-husband came to his senses, turned pale, and dropped the box cutter he was holding. When the police arrived and began their investigation, perhaps not wanting to be implicated in the situation, my sister-in-law left my ex-husband behind and fled barefoot through a window. The police arrived quickly, and we were each questioned. I had sustained a superficial cut on my neck from when my ex-husband waved the box cutter, so I decided to file a police report for assault. My ex-husband, now sobbing, was escorted by the police to the patrol car outside. After speaking with the police, I went over to my brother-in-law, who sat slumped on the sofa. His hands were trembling as he said with a tired smile, "I've never raised my voice like that before." Despite what had happened, I couldn't help but burst out laughing at his comment, and we both ended up laughing together. I deeply thanked him, who had risked his life to save me. My brother-in-law and I, through lawyers, recovered damages from my ex-husband and sister-in-law, and at the same time, my brother-in-law also divorced his wife. His ex-wife cried and clung to him, but it seemed he had no hesitation about his decision. Moreover, he fired my ex-husband. Apparently, my ex-husband had been an incompetent and burdensome presence at the company. Although he had been employed out of fraternal pity because he was the company president's brother, having a criminal record now made it impossible to justify keeping him. My former sister-in-law was seen by many neighbors fleeing barefoot on the day the police were called, and the arrival of the patrol cars made the entire ordeal known throughout the neighborhood. Some of her co-workers lived nearby, and soon her affair and the fact that my brother-in-law had divorced her spread throughout her company, making her situation extremely uncomfortable there. Abandoned by my brother-in-law, my former sister-in-law began living with my ex-husband. However, he had never liked working and, now confined to a wheelchair, lost all motivation to work, spending his days idling at home. Being at home didn't mean my ex-husband started helping with household chores, something he had never done before. My former sister-in-law had to take care of his needs, provide nursing care, and support him financially, which quickly exhausted her. At work, she was looked down upon and felt so uncomfortable that she wanted to quit, but she couldn't because she needed the income to support their living expenses. Moreover, their impoverished living conditions at home led to constant fights with him, and their relationship was on the verge of breaking down. Eventually, she suffered a mental breakdown and abruptly stopped coming to work, ultimately resigning from her job. Sometime later, my brother-in-law received a call from the welfare office informing him that they would be receiving welfare assistance. They were admitted to some hospital, but my brother-in-law didn't inquire further, so we don't know the details. Neither my brother-in-law nor I know where they are or what they are doing now, but it's not hard to imagine their current situation. However, that no longer concerns us. This is the path they chose by betraying their family. I now work at my brother-in-law's company. With the divorce, I no longer needed to take care of my ex-husband, and I wanted to work full-time instead of part-time. My brother-in-law offered me a job to fill the gap left by my ex-husband. The years of part-time cleaning work, despite being ridiculed by my ex-husband and former sister-in-law, are now proving useful. My meticulous organization and attention to detail have been well received by my colleagues, who appreciate my tidiness and ability to notice small things. Surrounded by kind coworkers, I enjoy working and have a fulfilling life every day. A year has passed since then, and my brother-in-law seems to have found a wonderful new partner. He looks healthier and happier than before. I truly wish that this kind man, who fiercely protected me back then, finds happiness this time around.